Good day to all the producers out there. Thank you for joining us on this field huddle. Today we're going to talk about an update to the canola market, and we're also going to take a dive into some research articles that I thought were interesting, and I'm going to hopefully make it into plain, easily understandable language for you and how to implement that on your farm. So with us today we have...
Hey everyone, Dion Sauer. I'm a grain marketing advisor for our Sask Central Market Sense Advisory team. I work with Marielle Kotick and Paul Kobiela, and I am going to give you a bit of an oilseed update and a canola market update and talk about some different positions that you guys might be in this year, depending on, where you're at on yields and percent sold so far. For the marketing season. So with... All
right. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Cut that out. Claudia, thank you. I interrupted her. You finish your sentence.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Claudia's gonna have fun with this. So, as you know, I'm Ryan Mullenbeck. I'm the market development agronomist for the Rosetown and Kindersley locations. So now I'm gonna turn it over to Dion, and she is going to show us her presentation and give us an update.
Okay, so let's walk through a little bit of an oilseed update. It's November the 20th, I do believe. Yes, it is. So November the 20th, 2020. I thought maybe we'd just start by taking a look at the bigger picture. So what's happened so far this year? I know a lot of things have happened this year in the canola market and the soybean market specifically that we don't typically see happen. We saw price rallies through the harvest time period that weren't normal. Like this year, price action has been largely about demand. So China has been front-loading soybean purchases from Brazil, Canada, and the United States, which isn't necessarily unusual. I guess the unusual part of all of this is the amount of purchases they've made. You look at the reasons why, and the big parts are they're rebuilding stocks with hog herds recovering, and also there's the possible anticipation of further COVID logistical issues or other further trade conflicts with the U.S., especially post-election and uncertainty there. So a big one as well would be the Brazil soy. They have issues in their... Even so, they're still calling for a monster crop, well over 100 million metric tons, 190 million metric tons, sorry. So that begs the question, will prices fall with that large crop coming? We've got a lot of time left till that crop is in the bin. So it's really gonna come to light in January, February as to how much that's gonna have an impact on the soybean market, which in turn will definitely impact the canola market. But with the continued cuts to soybean yields and production numbers of the United States, over and over again, we're seeing this in their USDA reports. The market is likely to be super sensitive to any production problems we see in South America this winter. So that's going to be a close watch out for us on the soybean market and the canola market. So I guess more specifically, what does this mean for canola? Like soybeans, the primary driver of our strong canola prices has been demand. Canada did face some production issues as well. As I'm sure many of you know, our yields weren't exactly what we'd hoped for. We didn't get the moisture we would have liked to. But we will need to continue to be aware of what the soybean oil and meal markets are continuing to do. The rallies we've seen have not been solely on what happened with our yield and our production in Canada this year. To note, canola crush demand will continue to be very strong going forward. No signs of it slowing down. Canola exports have been getting stronger again. We're seeing China come back as a big buyer, along with Mexico and the United Arab Emirates also making steady purchases. With China having pulled out a while back, we created some new markets which we continue to export into. including Nepal, Malaysia, Indonesia, many Latin American countries. So that is really helping our export numbers and helping prop those canola prices up. So today we saw canola climb all the way above 577 resistance to 579 briefly, and has since closed at 576.50. If we can surpass and hold a position above that 577 resistance, we would be looking at around 582.80 as our next resistance level. So, I mean, all of this sounds really bullish and definitely longer term trend wise, and we can talk about this on the next slide. That is, you know, where we're sitting today. But some watchouts might be sell-off or consolidation in the market in the nearby. That being said, if you do have any unpriced basis contracts in for December or January, just looking at considering the risk reward, if you're making profits, if you were to lock now, maybe that, and you can always re-enter the market later using some of Cargill's suite of tools, which we can also talk about in a couple of slides here. So, as I'd said, as it sits today, the optimism remains for canola prices to climb higher in the coming months. So overall, the longer term trend still looks great. There are a lot of options to still take advantage of the really good prices you guys are seeing out there today, while still remaining in the market if we do get that, you know, continue to see this rally. Another thing that we found our customers might be dealing with today, and some other Cargill customers that I've spoke to, is because of the yields that you did get this year. You know, it was a lot less than what we were expecting. So you might have been further sold and further positioned ahead of harvest than you would have liked. So where you thought, you know, I'm only 20% sold, you might have ended up being 60, 75, 80% sold. And now you wish, oh, I wish I still had that physical canola left to sell. But if you've made those sales with Cargill, you haven't delivered the grain yet, there are still, again, lots of options to add things to your existing contracts to try to build up that price and re-enter the market. So a couple of specific strategies that we've been talking to our clients about, depending on their individual situation, have been the minimum price call and the focal point. So these tools both allow for the possibility to make profit and add to your contract price if the market goes up. They function a little bit differently. The upside on both of the contracts is unlimited. So if you enter into these contracts and the market just goes up, doesn't fall back at all, there is upside potential to add extra dollars onto your existing contracts. The risk is quite different in both of these contracts. So with a focal point, where you enter the market, you need to set a stop below your entry. And if the market does dip down below your stop, you are at risk of losing additional dollars on this contract. Whereas a minimum price call, if the market falls or stays neutral, yes, this tool could have $0 value if it expires worthless. But if the market does go down before expiry, it's not going to kick you out of that contract, and it's going to give you a little bit more time in the market to see, hopefully, that the market will rally back up and that you'll be able to make some profit on this tool. So that's a very, very generalized description of each of those tools. Something we do with our customers is we'll walk through real life examples. We'll draw it out. If you're unfamiliar with these solutions, there's no problem. We have no problem walking through those with you. And that being said, like with the Market Sense team and our advisors, we're really looking at your individual situation. We don't like to make blanket recommendations. We're going to make a strategy for you and your farm. So, you know, we'll help you enter into these contracts, and we'll monitor and guide you through the process. So we don't leave our customers hanging. Some of these have a few moving pieces to them that we're watching the markets every single day. And, you know, this is just part of our job. And helping you max the reward and lower the risk on a grain marketing plan. So I guess that being said, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to your local advisory team. We have time to sit down with you, talk about whether it be, you're feeling heavily sold in a market where you want to get back into, or maybe you're looking to sell some more but want to stay in that market. We will walk through those options with you and make the decision based on what's best for you and your farm. With that, I will hand it back over to Ryan.
Okay, so Dion, thanks for that presentation. So what's holding guys back? Like, why wouldn't a producer take advantage of this right now?
I mean, like I said before, they could be in a couple of different situations. So if they're already, more physically sold than they'd like to be and have no canola left to sell, it could just be that they don't know they have these options. So that's just a matter of, like I said, reaching out to your advisor or reaching out even to your grain or account rep to walk you through these. Because as long as you have, that canola contracted at Cargill and it's not been delivered on yet, then it's not too late to use these tools and solutions. On the flip side, I would say, if you have canola in the bin and are reluctant to sell it because you think, well, listen to what she just said, the prices are just going to go higher and higher, we just caution that we're seeing some very attractive canola bids right now. And if you're making a good profit at these bids for your farm, you can make those sales, you can make that profit, and then you can add something to it after those sales with Cargill to keep you in the market. So it's almost, if it's just that you're worried that you're going to miss out on that rally, but even if you need the movement, you say, I want to get my canola out of the yard before March, before road bans, or it's in bags and I want to get it moved, but the market's going to go up. What do I do? Like, this is a way to still, contract your grain, get it moved. But if there is that, if the rally continues, that you're still in the market and you still have a chance to take advantage of that.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to roll into the next part of the presentation here. And we'll cut here just for a second, Claudia. So, Dion, you're just seeing the main slide?
I'm just seeing you right now.
Okay. Okay, we'll share my screen. Now you're seeing my slide.
Yep.
Still good? Just the slide?
You betcha.
Okay, so we'll start, Claudia, we'll start right here again. Okay, thanks, Dion, for that. Really good advice for all our producers. I'm going to roll into the next section here of our presentation. I'm going to talk to you guys about hopefully some practical information that you can apply to your farm. I went into some of the journal articles that are coming out of Ag Canada, some of the research that the folks at Brandon and Swift Current and other locations are doing, and hopefully giving you guys some new information, some different information on canola production that you can implement on your farm that they're discovering with some of these studies that are going out right now. So the first one is high yield no-till canola production on the Canadian prairies is what it was called. This was done down in Swift Current. And so what the study was doing is wanted to maximize canola production using 4 different methods: seeding rate, nitrogen rate, the inclusion of ESN, and then the use of a fungicide. So the researchers seeded canola in 2008, wheat the year after, and then canola again in 2010. And so what it found was that higher seeding rates, so targeting 15 seeds per square foot versus 7.5 seeds per square foot, increased canola yields by 1.2 bushels in 2008, and in 2010 it was even higher at 2.8 bushels per acre. And so that is something we talk about, is we want to get our plant populations high enough, and we can account for basically half the seeds we put in the ground to not germinate and grow a plant. So that's where that number of 15 seeds per square foot comes from, to get our target plant population. They also found quite obviously that higher nitrogen rates were the biggest driver of yield. Yield targets related to nitrogen, they can be sometimes difficult to meet, depending upon how conservative the agronomist is, how much risk you want to take on. Different people will recommend, different rates to hit a different yield target. And even, a lower yield target in soil that has much lower organic matter may nitrogen than a higher yield target on soil that has much higher organic matter. So there's a lot of factors going on, obviously, that, the science says, we need 3.5 pounds per bushel, but there's other things going on. But it's not always cut and dried, but we can help you look at what your crop needs. We can help you look at what your soil needs and also factor in your appetite for risk on nitrogen. But the takeaway is that higher nitrogen rates, higher than the recommendations, were more profitable and resulted in more canola production. ESN showed a result of 1.7 bushels per acre, but only in 2010. It was a little bit more variable. They mixed the 50-50 with urea, and the researchers' takeaway from that was, yes, it's a tool. It can be variable, maybe something to include, but 50-50 is where they felt the best usage rate was for ESN. And then finally, fungicides. In 2010, the fungicide treatment showed a significant yield bump, and that was even when the rate of sclerotinia was only 5% infection rate. And they still got 1.7 bushels per acre out of that fungicide treatment. So again, they kind of caution things by saying, typically it's when infection rates are 30% higher that we'll see, a really good response. And this kind of went against the trend. But that being said, if there was a year to spray for sclerotinia in West Central Saskatchewan, 2020 was the year. I was out scouting this fall, and I could easily pick out, significant damage, areas of infection and lost yield potential throughout many of the canola fields I was in. And I really think it was a missed opportunity for growers to maximize their production this year. So don't just say, oh, well, the signs aren't quite pointing there. Maybe that you target 2 or 3 fields where you're going to have the best results and try it out. I think guys are missing an opportunity on that. So all in all, at the end of the day, in 2008, by having the highest seeding rate, having the highest nitrogen rate, using ESN and using fungicide, gained the research plots 5.9 bushels per acre over the treatments where it was the lower seeding rate, lower nitrogen, no ESN, no fungicide. And in 2010, that advantage went to 8.9 bushels per acre. And that, of course, was the year when the ESN paid off and the fungicide paid off. So you can see how all these little incremental steps in your production tactics can add up. Next, we're going to look at kind of a hot topic is seed size and seeding rate effects on canola emergence, development, yield, and seed weight. So, I'll get to the seed weight issue. First, we're going to touch on seeding rates, but what this 2013 study wanted to find out was that, our different 1,000 kernel weights in canola and different seeding rates, how does that influence yield? How does that influence oil quality? So with seeding rates, higher seeding rates gave better emergence and more crop biomass early on, and this really helped improve the ability for that crop to compete. Higher seeding rates also went on to increase bushel weight and also oil content. It also improved the stubble density, which I'll kind of touch on later. And finally, the canola at the higher seeding rates, again, if you look here, we're looking at that 150 seeds per square meter, and that just, you divide that by 10, and that gives us 15 seeds per square foot. So aiming for this target population of plants per square foot. So again, this higher seeding rate, the canola flowered sooner, it matured sooner, it had fewer days to the start of flowering, and fewer days to maturity. So one of the major factors in improving canola yield is avoiding that heat blasting at summertime, and higher seeding rates are shown to be a way to get around that. And when it comes to establishing that canola stand too, one thing in another study that they found was that the uniformity of the stand and the way that the plants are spaced out is very, very important as well. The researchers found between 20 and 32% yield increase compared to a field where the stand was uneven. So the importance of an even stand is even more prevalent when our seeding rate drops or our plant stand drops below 6 plants per square foot or lower. Then that unevenness penalty shows up even more. So important to keep your seeding rates up. Important to have an even and uniform stand. And when it comes to seed size, there was no effect on yield or oil quality at the end of the day based on seed size. But what using that larger seed did result in was more early biomass, and that's going to, so we have more plants, so it's going to give us more competition. And also the stand was able to flower sooner and finish flowering sooner. So here you can see that the bushel weight here is increasing linearly. So as our seed weight goes up, so does our bushel weight. You can see our days to flowering is decreasing, our days to maturity is decreasing, and here is our biomass increasing with seed weight. So again, all great things that we want to do. That we'll get from a larger seed. And I know this is kind of a contentious issue because some guys like the small seed, the other guys like the big seed. We sometimes don't get a choice. As far as yield and quality of the grain, not necessarily any benefits, but speeding up flowering, speeding up maturity, and reducing your risk to some high temperatures, and some of the negative impacts from flowering and pod development. They're showing that the bigger seed is paying off in that respect. So for field canola, yield is largely dependent upon plant survival during the hot summer. And, we want to, okay, cut here. I'm lost. Start over. Claudia, cut here. Where are we? Okay. And we'll take it over again. So plant survival and canola yield, they found overall after these two studies was that the hot, dry summer weather was really what was affecting yield much more so than the emergence of seedlings. And so higher seeding rates, a uniform stand, and if you can get it, you can choose a bigger seed, is all going to increase competitiveness of that crop early on. It's going to flower sooner, and it's all going to flower at the same time. And this is going to combine to help you, possibly attain a more uniform crop and a higher yielding crop. So I'm going to put a little plug in here for thinking about, seeding your crop differently across all crops, not just canola. The trend or the standard practice is to certain weight regardless of what the size of the seed is, or seed a certain volume. So it's like, I'm doing 5 pounds, or I'm doing 2 bushels of wheat, or I'm doing a bushel of lentils, and just kind of taking that for granted. Now with canola, the high cost of seed and invigorate bags and things like that have kind of like pushed the issue to the front of producers' mind, where they're really thinking about, well, how many pounds do I need to seed based upon the seed I've gotten? How can I, maximize my production and maybe save some costs? They quickly figured out that if you seed by seed size and targeted plant population, there's a lot of ways that you can be further ahead. So I really want to encourage you to get your seed tested this winter before you plant it this spring. Bring it into Cargill. We can get your lentils, your peas, your wheat, whatever tested. And before we send it off, we're going to check off 1,000 kernel weight test. And we can show you how to take that 1,000 kernel weight test and optimize your plant stand for other crops in the same way you would for canola. And I also mentioned a little bit about stubble density. Just another study I found a marked difference in yield when seeding canola into wheat stubble that was cut at 20 inches versus stubble that was cut at 8 inches. Obviously, to a lot of you guys watching this, yes, the taller stubble did capture more moisture and was able to resist drying out and evaporation longer into the year. These studies were done when the spring was really wet, but the summer was really dry, and that taller stubble had a marked difference in yield throughout the year. The other thing they found as well is that regardless if the stubble was cut high or cut low, if the crop was lodged and that stubble was bent over and damaged, that was a big penalty to canola yields the year after. The soil just didn't allow the plant to get going and dry out and get the heat and the sun. So tall stubble captures more moisture, gives you a yield boost in subsequent canola years. Damaged lodge stubble is something obviously you really want to avoid, not only because it's hard to cut, but it's going to give you a penalty in your canola rotation the next year. And so just one last study here, the economic impact of residual nitrogen. So this one takes a bit of setup. So it was a long-term study. In 2009, they planted either peas, lentils, canola, wheat, or faba beans in 2009. In 2010, they grew canola, and then they grew barley, followed again by canola in 2012. And during those 3 years, they had a varying nitrogen rate. They studied different rates between 0 and 105. 2013, they grew canola, and then the study wrapped up in 2013 they grew wheat, and then the study wrapped up in 2014 with canola. And those last 2 years, in 2013 and 2014, they didn't supply any extra nitrogen. And so the goal was to see, what is the impact of that crop in 2009, and what is the impact of fertilizer applications. So what was found was that in those last 2 years, the 2009 crop had no effect. It was 4 to 5 years ago, really no effect on the crop at that point. But what was found was that those nitrogen application rates, depending upon what the level was, they had an effect in 2013 and in 2014, the last 2 years. So those subsequent fertilizer applications had persistent effects. They increased the soil nitrate levels and really showed a benefit. So again, as you already know, the best return obviously is when we target our nitrogen rates based upon the crop we're growing and the soil and conditions we have, and that's always what we want to do. But the takeaway that's important is that in our dry conditions where excess nitrogen can be remaining in the soil, it's going to be used by following crops. So this residual nite fertilizer, it won't take care of all your needs next year, but it's definitely going to have an effect and help your crop do better in subsequent years. So what you're doing this year in 2021 will affect your crop in 2022 and 2023 as far as nitrogen goes. So the first study I talked about, mentioned how nitrogen levels was the big driver of canola yield. And, we know that there's always weather concerns for our producers, and maybe they're a little bit more cautious with spending the money on nitrogen, maybe a little bit more cautious than they should be. But what we can now plan for is that if that canola in 2021 is a wreck and you really poured the coals to it and we're hoping for a good crop, but it didn't work out, that nitrogen will contribute in 2022 and in 2023. It'll be an investment for the future. You're not going to lose out on it. So again, something that your rep at Cargill can help you talk about to show, what is our yield goal? How much nitrogen do we need? What's my risk economically? And so this is just a quick reminder of what every 10 bushels of canola is going to remove from the field and take up. So every 10 bushels of canola is it's going to take up 33 pounds of nitrogen, and 19 is going to leave the field. 15 pounds of phos, and 11 is going to leave the field, and so on. So for guys, if you're targeting a 50 bushel crop, you need 75 pounds of phos per acre, and of that, 55 is gone. So that's a factor that we really need to consider, that it takes pounds to grow bushels. And just keep in mind some of the micros as well that we see a lot in the Rosetown and Kindersley area are zinc and boron being factors. High pH soils, high calcium soils, cold, wet soils. These are all kind of things that tie up zinc, which we have lots of. And then boron, again, can be tied up by calcium, and it needs moisture to move around. So, often we see boron more available in the spring, and then as it dries up in the summer, that boron isn't quite as available. So with that, thank you for taking your time to sit with us and hopefully learn something. Contact your local Cargill representative, either on the grain or the input side, to learn a little bit more and how we can help you maximize your canola production.